public deserves to know how many people are illegally crossing the border into Canada. Covering up these numbers won't make the problems go away for the Liberals. So without these numbers, local officials can't plan to cope with the situation, and the government can't be held to account by us. So if, as the Liberals claim, there's no problem and there's nothing to see here, why are they telling the RCMP to hide these numbers?
Honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, Manitoba has started to use a facility which is supposed to help hold Canadian seniors as an emergency measure to deal with the huge influx of illegal border crossers. The community of Gretna and the entire province is furious because the Liberal government is doing nothing to stop this problem. Given that the Manitoba government is now requesting millions of tax dollars to deal with this situation, will the Prime Minister close the loophole on the Safe Third Country Agreement, stop this problem, and ensure that asylum seekers enter Canada through legal means?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, Canada's refugee system has been lauded around the world for being one of the most compassionate and efficient. Mr. Speaker, we laud the generosity of Canadians in border communities as they assist these asylum seekers. We have an independent board, the Immigration Refugee Board, that assesses each and every case on its merits, and if those people do not have a good case, they get to be removed as per the law. We are committed to our international obligations to give each and everyone who claims asylum due process and a fair hearing.
Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
The minister makes it sound like Canadians aren't generous if they simply stand up for their right to have our border integrity secured. Recent media reports have said that over half of the illegal border crossers have serious criminal records. This puts CBSA, RCMP, and community members in the area, their safety at risk, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, my question is very clear. There's a way that we can stop this, and it's by closing the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement. Why has this minister failed to act?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Agreement numerous times, but I'll now quote the head of the UNHCR in Canada. I really think that the conditions which prevailed at the time of the drafting and the adoption of the Safe Third Country Agreement in 2004 are the same as they are today, and it will be difficult to change a policy that is seen as good cooperation, good responsibility sharing between two systems that have the same values and the same procedural guarantees. As far as the asylum system is concerned in the United States, legally speaking, we have not seen a change. That is the UNHCR representative in Canada.
The Prime Minister has done nothing to address, and that's the issue of illegal border crossers at Canada's U.S. land border. These people are flooding across the border. Our border services agents are feeling the pinch, and community members are actually starting to feel frightened about the level of people that are coming across. Will the Prime Minister commit today to giving people the tools that they need by closing the loophole on the Safe Third Country Agreement, preventing this problem from occurring this summer?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
While the rest of the world closes off its borders against newcomers, we're proud that Canadians have continued to be welcoming and opening. Unfortunately, the Conservative Party is showing its roots of being fearful and closed in. We know it's important to defend our immigration system, to ensure the integrity of our borders. That's why we're ensuring that police officers and border service agencies have the resources they need to do their work. We will continue to defend Canadians' rights, security, and the openness that we know is a tremendous advantage and value for our country.
Two Conservative MPs are calling on the Liberal government to do more to deal with the influx of asylum seekers crossing the border into Manitoba.
Provencher MP Ted Falk and immigration critic Michelle Rempel held a media conference near Emerson this morning.
They're calling on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to do more to deal with this issue and close the loophole which allows asylum seekers to cross the border illegally.
Political battle lines are also being drawn over immigration in Emerson, Manitoba, a small border town that for months has been a major magnet for asylum seekers. Today, federal opposition politicians visited the community where resources and patience are running thin.
We need to protect the integrity of our borders.
And it's incumbent upon the Prime Minister to say this is unsafe and this should not be happening. We know that this issue is placing a strain on provincial resources. So that's why we firmly believe that in order for this problem to be permanently stopped, The government, through Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, must close the loophole in the U.S.-Canada Safe Third Country Agreement that allows people to illegally cross the border and still make an asylum claim. Mr. Speaker, there are motions in front of the Immigration Committee to study the illegal border crossing crisis. This urgent situation is draining resources of the RCMP, the CBSA, provincial housing, legal aid, and healthcare services. So Canadians are confused as to why the Liberals shut down debate not once but twice on this matter. So can the chair of the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration please update Canadians as to when this urgent matter will be debated at committee, or are the Liberals just going to keep shutting it down over and over again?
Honourable Chair.
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member knows well, it's the committee itself which decides what studies to study and which studies they will study in the future. Presently, we are studying immigration consultants, an issue of tremendous importance, and then the House mandated us to do an Atlantic immigration study, which we will be doing throughout the rest of this session and into the fall. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
I feel that many Canadians won't be satisfied with that answer. But, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister could be doing many things to address this issue, including closing the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement. Instead, the Liberals have announced a whole, wait for it, $30,000 for first responders in Manitoba. For those counting, that's a whopping $609 more than they just spent on Broadway tickets for wealthy investment bankers, Mr. Speaker. So my question simply is this: can the Prime Minister stand up and tell Canadians why his priority is Broadway and not the border?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, our priority is applying Canadian law and keeping Canadians safe. In fact, crossing the border in an irregular fashion is no free ticket to Canada. Those people are apprehended. They are identified biographically and biometrically. Their information is checked against all data systems in Canada as well as internationally. If there's a danger, they are detained. They go before the IRB to hear their claims, and if their claims cannot be justified, then deportation proceedings are commenced. The law is applied as are Canadian treaties.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm seeking leave for adjournment of the House for the purpose of discussing an important matter requiring urgent consideration pursuant to Standing Order 52. And this is with regard to the dramatic increase in asylum seekers at our U.S.-Canadian land border. Over recent months, we've seen a dramatic rise in people crossing the border illegally. And this has placed a strain on the RCMP, the CBSA, as well as provincial resources with regard to affordable housing, legal aid, and healthcare services. Recent reports have shown that 2017 we're on track to see a doubling of the amount of asylum seekers in Canada. This would be an all-time record high. Mr. Speaker, Canada is a very open and welcoming country, but we also want to make sure that we have a plan in place to make sure that our borders are secure and that people who are coming to Canada that are seeking asylum, that there's a broader plan in place with regard to resourcing. To date, we've not seen a response from the government on this, and given that we're heading into the summer months and we're going to see an increase in this situation, which is becoming more and more urgent, I feel that it's incumbent upon the House to debate this matter so that we can move on with coming up with a plan. Thank you.
Thank you, member for Calgary-Nose Hill, for raising this matter. However, I do not find that it meets the exigencies of the standing order. Orders of the member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
Speaker, reports released yesterday show that Canada is on track to receive double the amount of asylum claims in 2017 than it did last year. Many of these claimants will enter Canada by illegally crossing the U.S.-Canada land border. This is a record high, and using 2013 as a benchmark, only 38% of these asylum claims will be accepted as valid. When will the Prime Minister finally act to stem the flow of illegal border crossers so that Canada's resources can be better directed to support the world's most vulnerable? An explosive report shows that in the last 18 months, Canada has seen a massive spike in asylum claims that will cost taxpayers a staggering $2.97 billion in welfare payments that have not been budgeted for. By doing things like lifting the Mexican visa requirement and turning a blind eye to the illegal border crossing crisis, the Liberals have created a huge processing backlog, failing both taxpayers and the world's most vulnerable alike. How is the Prime Minister going to pay for his hashtag welcome to Canada, hashtag fail?
For Calgary Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, today is World Refugee Day, and on behalf of the Conservative Party of Canada, I call upon the Liberals to immediately develop a fully costed, transparent, sustainable plan to provide integration support for refugees, and in doing so, stop simply offloading costs for long-term refugee support to the provinces. Address the massive 45,000 case backlog of privately sponsored refugees. Establish a permanent standing subcommittee regarding internally displaced persecuted groups. Address the severe crisis in asylum claim processing times at the IRB. Stop turning a blind eye to the border crossing crisis in places such as Emerson, Manitoba. Pressure the United Nations to eliminate institutionalized discrimination of persecuted minorities within the refugee selection process. Make the Rainbow Refugee Assistance Program, established under our former Conservative government, a regular, ongoing program. On World Refugee Day, I affirm that the Conservative Party of Canada will continue to be a voice for the protection of human rights and the world's most vulnerable.
One person watching this closely is Michelle Rempel, who is the Conservative MP, Calgary Nose Hill. She's the immigration critic for the official opposition. We find Ms. Rempel in Calgary this morning. Hey, thanks for taking our call.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Tell me about this memo, first of all, with CBSA, before we get into kind of the general border crossing. What's the skinny on this?
So what the RCMP have done here is acknowledge that they need to have a protocol, like a formal protocol in place to deal with Haitian asylum seekers that are illegally crossing the border from the U.S. who have been found in possession of child pornography. What's concerning for me is that in that memo, if you read it, it actually says that there are instances where if the RCMP seizes the pornographic material, that the asylum claim can still proceed.
Yeah, I couldn't believe this. The memo said 4 or 5 refugee claimants from Haiti were found in possession of child pornography, which would be criminal in Canada. Sometimes they are processed for charges. Other times the RCMP just seizes the pornography and the person moves on to make a refugee claim?
That's correct.
What do you think of that?
Well, for months, John, I've been banging my head against the wall in the House of Commons saying, this situation is only going to get worse. It started in earnest in January after the immigration executive order was made in the United States, and then Justin Trudeau tweeted out, hashtag welcome to Canada. Now, for anyone listening, I want to state firmly that Canada should be an open and welcoming country for those that are in need. When we were in government under in the Conservative Party, we had a very orderly and compassionate asylum claim system. That tweet essentially erased the border. Since that point in time, we've seen a massive spike in people illegally crossing the border to make asylum claims. The Prime Minister refuses to come out and say that, first of all, this is unsafe. I grew up in southern Manitoba. I know what it means to be out in the field in minus 30 weather. We actually saw someone freeze to death trying to do this. He hasn't said that. And then the second thing is he needs to say this is illegal and that people who want to come to Canada should be entering the country through proper channels and using the process that we have in place to access the country. What's happened here, like what we're talking about today, the child pornography issue, there's been reports in recent months of people who originate from Somalia, who have serious criminal records, who are changing their identity to come into Canada. This all stems from the fact that the Liberals have not said, look, we have a process in place to welcome people to Canada. If you do not follow it, there are consequences to that.